Hello and welcome to this little short story video. Today I'm going to be reading from If You Loathe Me, which is one of my anthologies. It's a collection of 11 short horror and fantasy stories. The story I'm going to read is called How the Tibbles Got His Name, which is like a little explanation about the origins of a couple of characters from my Spallucciverse. But first, please give me a quick like, give me a subscribe to make sure you get more videos as and when they come out. Off we go. The sun beat down at the far end of the long, perfectly manicured garden, somewhere in the deepest depths of rural Oxfordshire. It was possibly the hottest day of the summer. Not that the small girl cared. She was on a mission. No, not a mission. A quest. She flumped herself down under a large tree, taking advantage of the handy shade, and rummaged around in her quest bag. In reality, it was a Barbie shoulder bag that Lisa Mulgrew's mother had bought her for her 4th birthday, but Ellie had taken a black Sharpie marker to the picture of the doll figure. She had scribbled a helmet over the iconic toy's blonde locks and had added a long sword in the doll's hand. Ellie was attired in a similar fashion, with a homemade helmet fashioned from aluminium foil perched atop her blonde locks, with their unusual red streaks. It went perfectly with a small plastic sword that she had tucked through the belt of her battered, muddy trousers. That was how girls were supposed to look, at least in Ellie's opinion. Most of the other girls she knew thought differently. Well, their mums did anyway. When she had turned up at Maisie Runcorn's birthday party, it had been fancy dress. So she had insisted on going as the Green Knight from the bedtime story that Daddy had been reading her. She had thought that the costume she had made had been awesome. She had taken loads of old cardboard boxes, decorated them with bright green paint, and attached masses of green strips of paper to them in order to make them rustle as she moved. She had even spoken in a big, deep voice all the way through the party, just like the knight in the story. However, when it had reached halfway through the party, it had become apparent that none of the other mums who had dressed their daughters as princesses and fairies were letting their children play with her. She had asked Daddy to take her home early. Maisie's mum had asked Daddy why they were leaving early, and he had said something loud which made her mouth open in a big, shocked, oval shape. Daddy did that to a lot of people he didn't like. Daddy did that a lot. It made Eddie smile. Sometimes, if it wasn't past her bedtime, she would sit curled up on the sofa with Mummy and watch Daddy on the big television in the living room. There are 2 types of programmes that he appeared in. They're the ones where he was walking around faraway places, talking about the people who had lived there thousands of years ago. He would inform the viewer clearly, precisely, and with a great deal of passion about how these people had lived, what they had believed in, and how they had died. Ellie's favourite show like this was the one with the big brick buildings in the very hot country. Daddy worked there a lot, and she wanted to visit it sometime, perhaps when she was grown up. The other type of programme that Daddy appeared in would be in a studio where he had to sit and talk to other people who weren't as clever as him. Ellie would get very excited as she watched Daddy's eyebrows rise up like they always did when he thought someone was being very silly indeed. Then he would say words that sounded very intelligent, and whoever the silly person was would be left unable to talk back, their mouth open like Maisie Runcorn's mums. Sometimes, when Daddy thought the people that were he was on telly with were beyond stupidity, he would even get up and walk off while they were still filming. Ellie dug into her quest bag and pulled out the piece of parchment upon which Daddy had written her latest quest. It had very precise instructions. She was to go down to the end of the garden and, under the large oak tree, she was to survey her surroundings until she located the red banner in the nearby undergrowth. When she had found the banner, she was to dig with her trowel and find the special talisman that she needed to collect. It would help her on her next quest. The 4-year-old pushed back her aluminium foil helmet and lifted her hand above her eyes in an attempt to keep out the glare of the sun. From the shade of the oak tree, she let her eyes track around the hedge at the perimeter of the garden. The banner had to be there somewhere, but she couldn't see it. Perhaps it had fallen over. She fished a peanut butter and jam sandwich out of her quest bag and chewed thoughtfully on the wholemeal bread. Daddy had been in a bit of a hurry today. His latest book was due out next week, the one with the large picture of the Grail on the front. This is why she was off pursuing her quest on her own, while he was sat in his office shouting funny words at the printer. Normally he would be here as her steward, helping her on her way. Perhaps when he had placed the banner, he had not forced it deep enough into the ground and it had fallen over. Ellie nodded as she stashed half the uneaten sandwich away for later. It always paid to conserve rations. She would just have to walk carefully along the edge of the hedge until she located the banner. It would be there somewhere. Heaving herself up and slinging the quest bag over her shoulder, she began to examine the base of the hedgerow, methodically lifting the overhanging branches with the tip of her sword. It wasn't long before she found the small red banner. However, it wasn't planted in the ground as it should have been. Instead, it was gripped firmly in the mouth of a diminutive brown dog. The small girl frowned. Well, this was an unexpected problem. She knew that you had to be careful around dogs. They could be either very friendly or rather bitey. Judging from the size of this one, if it turned out to be a bitey sort, it wouldn't actually do much damage. Plus, as it was sat there with the banner in its mouth, the small dog was wagging its little tail, which suggested that it might actually be friendly. Not taking her eyes off the dog, she set her bag down and drew out the remains of a sandwich, tore it in half, and offered a piece to the tiny banner snatcher. The dog cocked its head, stood up and wandered over. Dropping the banner at her feet, it whisked the sandwich out of her hand and wolfed it down in one whole lump. Ellie giggled. Well, I guess you must be hungry, she said to the dog. She tore the remnant of a snack into 2 more pieces, ate one herself, and offered the rest to the little canine, which gratefully accepted the treat. Ellie knelt down on the grass and examined the dog. It was indeed very small and a light brown in colour. Its hair was incredibly short, and looked like it would die from the cold if it spent too much time outside. Also, it wasn't wearing a collar. Do you have a name? She asked. The dog sat on its small haunches and once again cocked its head, causing its ears to flop over in an inquisitive manner. Apparently not, Ellie surmised. I think you ought to have one, she said. Everyone has a name. Mine is Ellie. Well, that's the short version anyway. Mummy and Daddy only tend to use my full version if I'm in trouble. She frowned as she thought hard about the little dog. And as she thought, she felt her brain go warm. As it did sometimes. Warm and fuzzy. It didn't do that a lot, but when it did, unusual things seemed to happen. Like when she got into trouble for at her worst first week at school, the teacher's special pen for writing on the big computer screen had gone missing. The woman had been convinced that one of the class had picked it up and taken it. Now, she had been speaking all happy and jolly, suggesting it wasn't something to worry about too much, and that whoever had taken it had obviously done so by mistake. However, even though she had said that if the child was to own up and bring it back now, they wouldn't get into trouble, Ellie had known otherwise. She had felt her brain go warm and fuzzy, and she could hear nasty words in the woman's head, saying things that she would like to do to them when she caught the little thief. Then Ellie's brain had gotten even warmer, and on a television screen in her head, she had seen her teacher's hands opening the top drawer to a desk and putting the special pen in there. So, not wanting the teacher to be cross, Ellie had put her hand up and told her where it was. Again, the teacher had appeared to be happy, but Ellie's warm fuzziness had shown her that she was in fact really cross for being made a fool of by a 4-year-old. Not only that, but the teacher had used her full name. So, after that, whenever Ellie's brain got warm and fuzzy, she imagined that she was pouring a bucket of ice-cold water over it to cool it down. As a result, the fuzziness was happening less and less, which Ellie considered to be a very good thing indeed. This time, the fuzziness was concentrating on the little dog. Ellie frowned. She guessed that it couldn't do much harm to see what happened, so she closed her eyes and let the warmth wash over her. A curious noise filled the ears inside of her head. It's like a bunch of sparrows chittering in the trees on a warm summer night. It was a soothing and pleasant song, and there was the light fluttering of wings mixed in with the melody. Her eyes reopened, and the little dog was still sat there, intently watching her. "I think I'll call you Mr. Tibbles," she said. Mr. Tibbles barked, apparently loving his new name. Ellie smiled. "Okay, now we've got that sorted, Mr. Tibbles. Could you please show me where you got that banner from?" She picked up the little flag and showed it to the dog, who first ran around her feet in a happy circle, before bouncing off to a piece of dark soil under the hedge. He began to scrabble at the disturbed earth, and Ellie pulled out her trowel, joining him in his excavation. "Now, wait a minute," she protested. "You'll disrupt the sight." Mr. Tibbles sat back and looked at her with complete canine incomprehension. Ellie pulled out 4 tent pegs and a ball of twine as she explained to her new friend, "Daddy does this for a living. He goes all over the world digging up old things. He says you have to be very careful and note everything down as you go." She pulled out her notepad and carefully wrote down in what a 4-year-old took to be meticulous handwriting, "Site under hedge, dug a bit by dog," and fished out her ruler and measured carefully before pegging out an exact square around where Tibbles had been digging. "Right, now we can begin." And with her trowel, she carefully scooped up handfuls of loose earth, placing them in precise piles to one side. "We have to be able to put them back afterwards," she explained. It wasn't long before her trowel hit something hard. She noted in her book, "Item just under surface." Tibbles stood next to her, his tail wagging excitedly as she pulled a small, roughly shaped piece of wood out of the ground. Eddie wiped the loose soil off its surface and noted a decoration that had been carved into it. A goblet and a sword. "Wow! It's the Grail and Excalibur," she explained to the dog. "That makes it incredibly special. They're what Daddy says other people call archetypes, but he thinks they're real, and one day he'll find them." The little dog whimpered. Eloise frowned. What's the matter?" Mr. Tibbles lowered his muzzle to the floor, his thin tail immobile. "Are you scared?" the worried girl asked, and she reached out to stroke him. As her small fingers touched his light fur, everything changed. Everywhere was white. It felt like it should be a large room, but there were no walls. All that she saw were 2 things hanging up in the air, a cup and a blade. She stood gazing up at them, and in her ears she could hear a 3-fold rhythm. It pounded deep down into her heart. There were footsteps, and she was aware of a figure walking towards her. He was dressed in the purest white, 6 long wings spread out to his sides. With eyes that burnt like suns, he gazed upon her. He pointed up with a finger that was enveloped in fire towards the cup and the blade, and intoned in a voice older than time, "We are one." As the woman bent down to pick up the artifact, not a crease formed in a smart green 2-piece suit. "She looks so peaceful," she commented to Mr. Tibbles, as she let her fingers stroke a lock of the red coloration in the otherwise blonde locks of a small girl who slept peacefully next to disturbed earth. The dog shimmered and changed in shape as he took the form of the small angelic wind creature that he really was. Sophia heard his chittering voice of concern. She shook her head. "No, she'll be fine. She'll just sleep it off. She'll have no memory of this for now, and her powers will subside until she really needs them again." Again the small creature chittered. Sophia raised an eyebrow behind her severe glasses. "What a stupid question that is," she laughed. "Of course I'm sure. I mean, she is me, after all." Tibbles shrugged. His eyes snapped up to the far end of the garden, up by the sprawling country pile, as they heard a deep masculine voice cry, "Eloise! Eloise Richmond, where are you?" The Dominion looked up and couldn't help but notice a tear forming in his companion's eye. He tugged at her skirt. "I know," she said. "We had better go, but," she gestured to the wooden token, "I'm taking this wretched thing with me." Looking at the carving of the cup and the blade, she muttered, "We need to work out how it ends up in his hands. If we can, we might save so many lives. And with that, they faded away into nothing, as if they had never been there, leaving behind a sleeping 4-year-old who dreamt of a world of knights and quests, and of a dragon so powerful that one day, in the far distant future, it would make the whole world tremble at its roar. I hope you enjoyed that. So again, it's from my little anthology, If You Loathe Me. Details over at aschambers.co.uk. Again, please give me a quick like, quick subscribe. That'd be fantastic. Take care. I'll see you again soon.